All right, Stratford's reporting. This is their headline just coming in right now. It's somewhere around 3:30 Eastern Time. It says, Syria limited narrow military action possible, Obama says. In the short article, it says, U.S. President Barack Obama said August 30th that he has not made a final decision on how the United States will respond to the alleged August 21st chemical weapons attack in Syria, though he is considering a narrow, limited act, Reuters reported. The United States is not considering a boots-on-the-ground approach to the issue. Nonetheless, the alleged attack is a challenge to the world and threatens U.S. allies such as Israel and Jordan by violating well-established international norms, Obama said. The world cannot accept that women and children have been gassed, he said. Obama is evidently not getting the multinational coalition his administration was expecting to share the burden of a limited strike operation against Syria and the aftermath. Now, if you notice in the article, it said, nonetheless, the alleged attack is a challenge to the world and threatens U.S. allies such as Israel and Jordan by violating well-established international norms. Now, even though many believe in the prophetic world that Jordan is somewhat of an ally to Syria, that's simply not true. In fact, they were the first Islamic nation to rise up and to say and to ask that Mr. Assad's step down. And it's no secret, in fact, CNN is reporting that Saudi Arabia used Jordan to smuggle weapons to the Syrian rebels in this two-year-long civil war. So here are two Islamic nations that would love to see the fall of Mr. Assad and his government, and two of them who just happen to be neighbors of Israel's. Now, earlier in the day, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry gave a report, and this is what he had to say. This is what CNN reported. It says that Kerry insisted Friday that the situation differs from Iraq, saying the intelligence community reviewed and re-reviewed its information more than mindful of the Iraq experience, and he added, "We will not repeat that moment." He cited particular evidence that shows al-Assad's regime was responsible. We know that for 3 days before the attack, the Syrian regime's chemical weapons personnel were on the ground in the area making preparations, Kerry said. And we know that the Syrian regime elements were told to prepare for the attack by putting on gas masks and taking precautions associated with chemical weapons. In addition, we know where the rockets were launched from and at what time, he said. We know where they landed and when. We know rockets came only from regime-controlled areas and went only to opposition-controlled or contested neighborhoods. Quoting from the U.S. assessment, Kerry said the attack killed 1,429 people, including more than 400 children. We assess with high confidence that the Syrian government carried out the chemical weapons attack against opposition elements in the Damascus suburbs, he said. Now I want to bring you an interesting analysis that Stratford just presented and gives you an idea of what goes on behind the scenes. And it starts out, it says, U.S. President Barack Obama is evidently not getting the multinational coalition his administration was expecting to share the burden of a limited strike operation against Syria. The British Parliament has voted against the military intervention, and NATO has said it would not participate in a U.S.-led mission. The United States can either unilaterally fire a symbolic but ineffective shot to demonstrate action for the sake of action, wage a highly unpopular multi-month air-land attack alone, or abandon the military campaign altogether. Without a meaningful coalition, the United States has little choice but to focus its efforts on a highly ambitious and difficult negotiated settlement involving Russia and Iran. The mounting limitations of the U.S. military option will redirect U.S. attention to an uphill diplomatic effort with difficult negotiating partners. Russia has an opportunity to demand U.S. attention on a number of issues related to defining a Russian sphere of influence in former Soviet territory and having the United States respect the boundaries that Moscow sets. Notably, any such deal would be designed to allow Russia and Iran to preserve political influence in Damascus. The low prospects of that negotiation on top of the limited utility of a unilateral punitive strike could lead the United States to back off its position toward Syria unless it sees a sufficient shift from still wavering allies, France and Turkey. So as you can see, with the United States' limited help from other nations and the response from Britain and also NATO, the U.S. has been backed into a corner and is forced to deal with both Russia and Iran, who looks to, from this analysis, is ready to make a deal in which the United States would give way in some of the former Soviet states and allow more influence in those states by Russia. Both Iran and Russia would be able to continue their influence in Damascus, and the Syria regime would get away with nothing more than a slap on the hand or no action whatsoever. But it looks like to me this is going to boil down to one particular thing, and that is that these nations are willing, I should say Iran and Russia, are willing to sacrifice Syria to some point in which they can trade that off for interests of their own in other areas of the world. And we need to understand that's exactly how the world works. And don't think for a minute that the United States would not do the same thing with Israel at some point in time. It's not going to shock me one bit one day if we wake up and find out the United States has made a deal with Iran that would normalize relationships with the United States, but would continue to leave Israel in imminent danger. And I believe this is where the Bible speaks that peace and security will be guaranteed. I believe that this will probably be where the United States will come in and say, hey, listen, we're going to guarantee your peace and security. But ultimately, I believe the deal will fall through, and that is when Russia will lead a coalition of the Islamic world down upon Israel to take a spoil and finally wipe Israel off the face of the map. I believe that he will do this through Syria. And it will likely happen just after the tribulation period begins and the peace accord has been created by the Antichrist. Of course, Ezekiel 38 says that Israel will be living in peace and safety when this happens, in a land with unwalled villages and cities. And I know many of you think that they're not living in a land of unwalled villages and cities right now, but certainly they are. Of course, Israel has 25 miles of concrete walls of their 500 plus miles of fencing around the perimeter of Israel. But most of that is chain link high-tech fencing. But there are absolutely no villages or cities that have walls around them right now. So even though many try to attach the walls around Israel to this prophecy of unwalled cities, it doesn't relate. There are no individual cities or villages with walls around them, or bars or gates. And if you're going to take this prophecy literally, that's what you have to take it as, because that's exactly what it says. So the 480 miles of chain link fence and the 25 miles of concrete wall, they don't have to come down at all for this prophecy to come true. But getting back to the article, it says, even if the United States scrapped both the military operation and a negotiation, Russia and Iran would still be in a comfortable position. Russia currently has the upper hand in Syria, and Moscow certainly would not mind having the United States embarrassed by inaction on Syria, or better yet, bogged down in another military operation in the Middle East. Still, Russia has a rare opportunity to engage in a long-deferred negotiation on issues that extend well beyond Syria. Moscow is unlikely to pass up that opportunity, but the negotiation itself may be too ambitious for the time. The United States is already seeing its credibility over even a limited, punitive Syria military operation erode, but it also is unlikely to strike a deal that strengthens Iran and Russia over a country whose civil war is manifesting beyond the control of any one foreign player. Given the constraints, the United States may begin backing off its position that a military operation is necessary, and for now absorb the risk of having a reputation for issuing questionable ultimatums. And frankly, I kind of see that being the direction that the United States very well might take. And the reason why I do is because I believe that that's going to be policy in the future for the United States. Not necessarily under Mr. Obama, but under future presidents as well. And when Russia and Iran and Turkey and some of these other Islamic nations do come calling on Israel, I believe that they will once again hear a bluff coming out of the White House and disregard it, knowing that the United States is basically done with intervening in the messes of the Middle East. And that's exactly what the American people think after Afghanistan and Iraq. They simply don't want to get into another mess in the Middle East. And I think it sets up a prophetic moment that will take place in which the Lord God will have to come in and intervene himself and bring about a miraculous victory over this daunting army. But certainly, getting back to Syria, there could be a limited strike that is carried out against Syria, and it could possibly bring about a missile response from Syria or Iran. Frankly, from the intelligence I have read, that I don't foresee that being the case. As I said in one of my previous videos, that Syria is a weakened nation, and due to this war with the rebels, they have limited resources, meaning their missile arsenal has been depleted quite a bit. I certainly don't foresee them putting on much of a fire show toward Israel if in fact the U.S. were to do limited strikes. But if in fact they were to do that and it became a situation in which many were killed in Israel, there's no doubt that the Israeli forces would retaliate. But I don't foresee Israel using this time to use nuclear weapons. Officially, Israel is still a non-nuclear country. And as has been in previous battles, they have not used any nuclear weapons. I don't foresee this being a change in policy. They may strike back, but they're not going. This will not be the time in which Isaiah 17:1 is fulfilled. When that prophecy is fulfilled, I do believe that will be the day when they will use nuclear weapons. So I place this war more on the other side of the tribulation period, when possibly during the apocalypse, when 1/4 of the world's population will be destroyed. Now I know that there are some who believe that we're about ready to view the beginning of the Psalm 83 war, which all of Israel's neighbors will somehow come together out of the clear blue and begin attacking Israel all at the same time. And of course, I wouldn't rule anything out in this day and age, but I consider that highly unlikely. And let me tell you the reason why. Number one, Syria is embroiled in a fierce civil war, number one. Number two, Egypt right now has problems of their own. Number three, Saudi Arabia for years now has been funneling weapons to the rebels who are fighting the regime through Jordan. And Jordan is certainly no friend of the Syrian regime at this point in time, and we're in fact one of the first nations to call for Mr. Assad to step down. And as pointed out earlier in the assessment, that both Israel and Jordan are equally in danger of missile response from Syria. So at least two of the nations who are believed to be involved in this Psalm 83 war want to see the Alawite Assad regime fall, and secretly would welcome a strike against Mr. Assad's government. So for that reason alone, I don't see Saudi Arabia or Jordan retaliating against Israel simultaneously, because they have responded to a missile strike from a government that they want to have removed anyway. But I know that many in the prophetic world are in too deep already with this Psalm 83, Isaiah 19, Isaiah 17, tri-prophecy, and they're digging themselves deeper and deeper into this big prophetic hole. So they're going to continue on with this as far as they can go. And by sometime next week, we're going to find out what the real truth is. And frankly, much of this miscalculation is coming about strictly for the reason that most of these prophecy pundits do not look at what real intelligence says. Yes, at some point this world will go from natural to supernatural, and all worldly intel will go by the wayside. In fact, that's what the Bible has said time and time again, that this world will be normal, and that people will be going about the everyday business and everyday things of this world and marrying and giving in marriage until sudden destruction. So what does that mean? And what it means is this right here. Even though the rapture of the church is a supernatural element of the last days, once the shock and awe is over regarding this supernatural event, the world will get back to a natural normal life. The Antichrist will come on the scene, and like I said, people will go back to being normal and will go about the everyday activities of life. That will go on for a while until sudden destruction comes about. And from that day forward, nothing will be the same. Then all hell will break loose in the world. Isaiah 17:1 will take place, in which Damascus will be leveled and uninhabitable. The world will be embroiled by a nuclear war that will take the lives of 1/4 of the world's population. Many, if not all, of Israel's neighbors will be targeted with nuclear warheads, and much of that land will also be uninhabitable, and many of those governments will no longer exist. The Antichrist and his kingdoms will survive, along with Israel and a handful of other nations that will be on the western side. It is very likely that following this world war, that this will be when Isaiah 19 will come into fruition, in which the cruel ruler that is spoken of in this chapter will be the Antichrist, and he will inflict Egypt very heavily. But there will be a glimmer of light that will come out of Egypt, in which 5 cities will turn to the Lord, and in the end the land of Egypt will enter into the millennium, and at some point during the millennium will receive a measure of blessing. But getting back in closing to the possible Syria strike, personally I do not see anything supernatural taking place within the next week or so. That is, of course, unless the rapture of the church takes place. And if that happens, all bets are off. But if the Lord continues to tarry, I look for this situation with Syria and with Russia and with Iran to be more of a first stage of a potential Ezekiel 38-39 Gog and Magog war, where it will put the United States and the West in a position of being hesitant to intervene into the Middle East from this day forward. And frankly, I think that's going to be the extent of what will go on from this day forward in the Middle East. And as always, I always like to close with a message of salvation. That is, if you don't know the Lord as Savior, your time is running out. You could die today. 150,000 people will die today. All of them will die with their sins paid for it, with only a fraction accepting that free gift of salvation. Don't let that be you. This is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.